You know what the Russian government says? They are not communists. But look, they are still communists. Russia is not safe. Look, you go there. People are driving on the sidewalk. And the cops don't catch them sometimes. It's like chaos. It's like in Vietnam. And now I'm gonna show you a guy talking about war from ABC.
It's not your typical campaign headquarters, but from this family home in Sydney's east, Kelly Merritt is fighting an almighty battle, seeking to change the way this nation goes to war.
The greatest decision a government can make must also be the most robust, considered, rationally grounded one, and the process that we have at the moment hasn't lent itself to giving us that kind of outcome.
In 2005, her husband, Flight Lieutenant Paul Pardol, was killed when the British Hercules he was flying in was shot down over Iraq. After years of wondering, last month's Chilcot report confirmed much of what she'd long suspected.
Military action at that time was not a last resort.
That's only hardened her resolve for reform to the war-making process in this country.
We invaded another country, and the fallout of that has been catastrophic.
In 2003, the debate over whether to enter Iraq raged in the streets and between political leaders.
The Prime Minister should listen to the message over the weekend and should unequivocally say to George Bush, we are not prepared to support a unilateral attack on Iraq.
And by the way, this is in 2003.
Parliament, but no vote. In the end, John Howard and his cabinet made the decision to join the so-called coalition of the willing.
We believe it is right, it is lawful, and it's in Australia's national interest.
National interest to get more resources and land.
Peter Jennings was John Howard's senior advisor for strategic policy at the time.
I remember that, this was a very serious time indeed. There was forensic focus on the intelligence.
But what if that decision had rested with Parliament rather than the Prime Minister and his inner circle?
If people are asked to vote on as grave a matter as sending young Australians into battle and creating enormous death and destruction in a foreign state, they would be very sensitive to how history would view their decision.
Former Secretary of Defence Paul Barrett has long called for war power reform, citing as proof Iraq and Vietnam.
I think if we'd stopped and listened to the opposition of the day on those two occasions, we might all have been a lot happier.
He has significant support in military circles, but many strategic minds believe it's a decision that must be kept away from the cut and thrust of parliamentary politics.
If you look at how parliaments are structured, you're really saying that you're going to leave decisions to go to war to a handful of crossbenchers in the Senate. And so if we were to have a debate today about deploying, that means to say it's going to be Jackie Lambie, it's going to be Pauline Hanson and her supporters, it's going to be Nick Xenophon. Are they the people we want to give Australia's war powers to?
Worldwide, the trend has been towards broader participation in decisions about war, particularly through parliamentary approval.
That's why we're seeing calls for war powers reform in Canada, New Zealand, the US, and particularly in the United Kingdom.
So the news of it.
In 2013, Britain's parliament voted down a government motion for military action in Syria after 30 Tory MPs crossed the floor.
I think tonight the House of Commons spoke for the British people.
Advocates here want the same opportunity in future.
If it ain't broken, why fix it? Well, it's broken.
The Greens are planning to reintroduce their bill to debate war powers as soon as possible when Parliament returns.
Australia is one of the last Western democracies that can send its citizens to overseas conflicts without any recourse to Parliament. The laws and legislations that are in place now that give essentially full control to the Prime Minister and the Executive date back to to the feudal times of royalty.
We're talking about one of the most important policy areas that our country ever has to face, and yet the decision is made by one person.
Both major parties support the status quo, although there are a few prepared to break ranks.
Our parliamentarians are intelligent enough, sophisticated enough to work through a scheme, a system that would work.
After serving with Special Forces in Afghanistan, Liberal MP Andrew Hastie took into Parliament firm views about rushing to war.
I'm now far more circumspect about the ability of military power to change people and societies.
But his maiden speech stopped short of calling for war powers reform.
Politicians who contemplate sending young men and women into foreign lands would do well to reflect on this truth about war, especially in view of its extreme violence and long-term effects.
The political reality is, at this time, there remains little appetite in Parliament to change Australia's war powers. But in the wake of Britain's Chilcot report, there is, it seems, a growing push here for Australia to take something positive from mistakes of the past through some form of public inquiry into Iraq.
Look, I think the lessons learning process on Iraq is only halfway done.
Former Army officer James Brown served on the battlefield and in coalition headquarters in Iraq.
I think we're unlikely to see an inquiry as forensic and extensive as Chilcot in Australia, but it would be good to see more on the public record about how some of these decisions were made.
I do think we need some form of deep analysis based on all the experience.
Another distinguished Army veteran, Mike Kelly, recently re-elected to Parliament, also believes now is the right time for some form of inquiry.
The whole strategic lead-up, planning, how we engaged with our allies, how we conducted and executed the mission. There's so much to be teased out about that. In particular, of course, the intelligence processes. So I think Australia needs to engage in that process. It's not too late. In fact, having some distance now behind us on it maybe will give us an even better perspective and a better opportunity to do that analysis properly.
It may not be the sweeping reform Kelly Merritt is after, but she believes an inquiry is a good start.
I'm not interested in flagellating Tony Blair and George Bush and John Howard. I'm just saying that it hasn't worked very well, and it's time that we review and reform those processes to safeguard Australia from making these disastrous mistakes again.
Well, that was it. So you heard it. War is not that good, isn't it? You know what? You know how Saddam Hussein? There is no evidence whatsoever that nuclear weapons were found. To this day, the US, the Australians, never found a nuclear weapon. To this day. And they'll be fighting for quite a while now. Once in the Middle East, and it's so beautiful. But now it's just a wreck. It's unbelievable how in human society we're that bad. You know what? It's just unbelievable. And you know what? When you go on Google and you type in House of Representatives, which is the lower stage of the Australian Parliament, and you go type in the House of Commons, that is the same for the British. The name is almost the same. And parliament, the house looks, the room looks the same. From 1901, Australia claimed to be an independent country, not to be ruled by British. But we are still like Britain. We just can't let it go. We can't let them go. It is unbelievable how we say we're one country, but we are not a one country. Like, I mean, seriously. This is why we have dead people in the world. This is why guns are not. The army have guns, but we have flowers. And you know what? I think this kid said they have guns, they can kill people. But then the father said, we have flowers. And that touched me. And I hope it touches you too. For years and decades and centuries, war is not to solve problems. Obviously. We need plan B. I can't just say stop war. Because that's never going to happen, is it? Especially with the US, with its powers. You can't use a country like that to destroy people's lives and their homes. And especially in North Korea, how they're constantly showing off the nuclear missiles and putting them into test. North Korea is ready for war. Because if we don't stop war, and there will be a war next time, North Korea will be prepared. But is all of us prepared? No. For years and decades, they have been prepared. But we are not prepared. So if we stop war, would they need to use them? No. Especially a country that has bad history and the world talking. It's unbelievable. And you know what? You know the United Nations? Why does the United Nations need to have guns? If they are uniting a nation, they don't need guns. They need flowers and joy and happiness. Because they are going to protect themselves. Great. But they're going to also use it to kill people. So is that called uniting a nation? We think we're good people. But in reality, we are not. And this is why we have all these problems and issues. Politics is another issue. It is unacceptable to be doing this to one another. Well, I hope that really got you. Because it's true. Have a think about it, guys. Have a think. Just, please. And tell me in the comments what you think. Because this is a serious issue, isn't it? I'm going to be opening a social media account and hope I can